Welcome to the Polymath Podcast, where we educate, enlighten, and inspire. I'm your host, Dr. John Andrew Morrow. I received my PhD from the University of Toronto, where I studied Hispanic, Islamic, and Indigenous studies. I've also completed over 40 years of Islamic seminary studies. Recognized as a master teacher and a distinguished professor, I am the author of over 50 peer-reviewed academic books and hundreds of scholarly articles. Today's topic, Muhammad Abdullah, Farad, or fraud. Like his father, Elijah Muhammad, Warith-Din Muhammad also maintained that W.D. Farad was alive and well for decades after his official disappearance. In a speech he gave on March 19, 1976, Warith-Din Muhammad affirmed that, "Master Farad Muhammad is not dead, brothers and sisters. He is physically alive, and I talk to him whenever I get ready. I don't talk to him in any spooky way. I go to the telephone and dial his number." In 1977, Warith-Din Muhammad informed Zafar Ishaq Ansari, a Pakistani scholar, that he believed that Farad had come from the Indo-Pakistani subcontinent, that he was of Ahmadiyya background, and that he was still living in the United States. After being faithfully fed more information by Warith-Din Muhammad, Ansari put more concrete details in print in 1985. He wrote that W.D. Farad was still alive, that he was from the Indian subcontinent, a person of Qadiani background, and was a man called Abdullah, an imam in one of the black Muslim mosques in Northern California. Warith-Din Muhammad, who assumed the leadership of the Nation of Islam after his father's death and brought the organization into the fold of Orthodox Islam within a few short years, claimed that W.D. Farad was alive as late as 1990. Carl Evans, however, has helped to discredit this claim. As he writes, "People promoting the claim that Farad was the same person as Muhammad Abdullah Sahib are either bad mathematicians, poor scholars, or merely uninformed. Everyone agrees that Abdullah died of heart failure in June 1992. Assuming, for the sake of argument, that he was Farad, whom Elijah Muhammad claimed was born in 1877, he would have been at least 115 years old. Had he been born in 1893, as indicated on Farad's draft card from World War I, he would have been almost a century old. The only reason Elijah Muhammad said that Abdullah was Farad is because he painted himself into a corner. He gave an interview after the 1963 Los Angeles Herald story broke out about Farad and W.D. Ford being the same person. He claimed that he was still in touch with Farad. Naturally, this was news to members of the Nation of Islam. Once Muhammad Ali joined the group and started giving the NOI half of his boxing earnings, he wanted to meet Farad. Knowing that was impossible, Muhammad called upon his old friend Abdullah to pretend to be Farad. Ali and his wife Khadija were thrilled and had their picture taken with him, one of which is widely available on the internet. A doctoral student, an Ahmadiyya scholar, and an amateur filmmaker have all bought into this theory, which is easily disprovable. In March 1976, Warith-Din Muhammad claimed to know the true identity of Master Farad. He alleged that Farad was an ordinary Muslim who visited the United States in 1930 and was distressed at the conditions in which blacks lived. Observing that neither the church nor immigrant Muslims had addressed the problems of African Americans in any constructive way, he designed a skillful plan to uplift the black community and bring them into the fold of Islam. Warith-Din Muhammad would later claim that, contrary to NOI doctrine, W.D. Farad never disappeared and had remained in contact with Elijah Muhammad and other members of his family. In 1985, after receiving inside information, Pakistani scholar Zafar Ishaq Ansari reported that W.D. Farad was none other than Muhammad Abdullah, an Ahmadiyya Muslim who had acted as an advisor to Elijah Muhammad since the late 1950s and had served in later years as the private tutor for Warith-Din Muhammad. As Majida reports, in Warith's account, the father of the Nation of Islam reappeared late in his life, repented for what he had done, and made an effort to bring about the end of his own work. To help him undo the vastly unorthodox version of Islam that Farad and Elijah Muhammad had foisted upon blacks, Warith Muhammad appointed Farad the Imam of the mosque in Oakland, California, where he was known as Muhammad Abdullah. A more detailed background of this man is provided by Richard Brent Turner in Islam in the African American Experience. Born in India, Muhammad Abdullah came to the United States in 1959 from the Fiji Islands, where he was a teacher and a missionary. He learned about Elijah Muhammad from the newspapers and was a close friend and advisor, in constant contact with him by mail and in person until Elijah Muhammad's death in 1975. From 1961 to 1963, Abdullah was a teacher to Elijah's son Warith in Philadelphia. They were both members of the International Muslim Brotherhood, and Abdullah tutored Warith in Arabic, Urdu, and the Quran. Muhammad Abdullah, the man purported to be W.D. Farad, appears in a photo in the November 1976 issue of the Bilalian News, which reported on his first khutbah or Friday sermon. Both this photo and others of Muhammad are not convincing. As Michael Muhammad Knight puts it, comparing a clean-shaven, dark-haired man with no glasses from 1926 with a bearded, white-haired man with glasses from 1976, it could have been the same guy. Or not. The man in Bilalian News has a fuller face than the man in the mugshot, maybe a fuller nose, and his eyes were less angry. He didn't look to be 99 years old, as he would have been by Elijah's story. Despite Warith Muhammad's certainty that the Imam was Farad, continues Majida, Abdullah, who died in June 1992 at the age of 87, never admitted he was Farad. Since he lived in the late 80s and acted as the Imam of Mosque number 77 in Oakland, California, from 1975 to 1985, there are large numbers of Muslims alive today who met the mysterious Muhammad Abdullah, who died in 1992. Not only was Muhammad Abdullah the Imam for the followers of Warith Din Muhammad at the mosque now known as Masjid Warithin, but he was also the Imam at the Ahmadiyya Mosque in Hayward, California, for numerous decades. As the publisher and editor of the Muslim Herald from 1961 to 1966, and director of the Muslim Society and the Islamic Center of San Francisco, he was a well-known Muslim leader. Since he received so many visitors seeking knowledge, his home address at 1540 C Street in Hayward appeared in directories as both Masjid Imam Muhammad Abdullah and Ahmadiyya Anjuman Ishaat Islam. Muhammad Abdullah denied that he was Farad, saying that, "It is all right to say that I am Farad Muhammad for Wallace D. Muhammad. I taught him some lessons, but I am not the same person who taught Elijah Muhammad, and I am not God." When I asked Dr. Akbar Muhammad, the brother of W.D. Muhammad, whether he believed that Muhammad Abdullah was W.D. Farad, he responded as follows. With respect to Muhammad Abdullah, with all due respect to Imam W.D. Muhammad, I am not inclined to believe that he was Farad. Why? Because I have not met Muhammad Abdullah, nor am I aware of any authoritative report in which he stated that he is the Farad who appeared in 1930s Michigan. Whether or not he genuinely believed that Muhammad Abdullah was W.D. Farad, Warith Din Muhammad was attempting to reappropriate him to legitimize transitioning the Nation of Islam into the world community of al-Islam in the West. This process of myth-making has been duly described by Herbert Berg in Myth-Making in the African American Muslim Context and Sally Howell in Old Islam in Detroit. Furthermore, his claim that Muhammad Abdullah was W.D. Farad coincides with a period of conflict within the Nation of Islam. By late 1979, the followers of Farrakhan from the reconstituted Nation of Islam, who opposed Warith Din Muhammad's move towards mainstream Islam, along with his admission of whites into the world community of al-Islam, had released documents which demonstrated that the latter had collaborated with the FBI. In tit-for-tat fashion, Warith Din Muhammad conveniently revealed that Almighty Allah, aka W.D. Farad, was Muhammad Abdullah, who supported the move towards Islamic orthodoxy. How convenient. Considering the timing of this revelation, Carl Evans appears to have been right when he gave the papers no credence. Not only did Evans and others object to the claim that Muhammad Abdullah was Farad, the Abdullah family did so as well. When asked whether his father was Farad, Zafar Abdullah, the son of Muhammad Abdullah, responded, "I don't believe he was." If Muhammad Abdullah was indeed Farad, and he was born in 1905, he would have been in his mid-20s in the standard photograph displayed by the Nation of Islam. Furthermore, he could not possibly have been drafted to fight in World War I at the age of 12. As Michael Muhammad Knight has suggested, W.D. Farad's reappearance in California was just another myth for the pile. A well-intentioned effort to put the issue to rest once and for all. As his book Tripping with Allah and Drugs makes amply clear, Knight no longer believes that Muhammad Abdullah was W.D. Farad. After all, Abdullah made no claim to Farad's identity. As can be appreciated, dating is the theory's undoing. If Muhammad Abdullah was truthful about his birth, he was 87 when he died. However, if he was really born in 1893 or 1895, he was nearly 100 years old at the time of his passing. According to a former Ahmadiyya missionary, Dr. Muniruddin Ahmad, who resides in Hamburg, Germany, Muhammad Abdullah was born in British India in 1905. This is confirmed on Muhammad Abdullah's California death certificate. In an interview conducted with Bilaliya News in August of 1977, Muhammad Abdullah explained that his father, who was a school teacher, also wanted him to be a teacher. So after completing high school, he went to an Islamic college, received his training, and started to teach. Shortly after his marriage to Hamida Begum in Lahore in 1930, conducted by the father of Dr. Saeed Ahmed Khan, he was sent by the Lahore branch of the Ahmadiyya movement as its missionary to Fiji. As Master Muhammad Abdullah testified in 1962 in the original Urdu version of A Mighty Striving, Life and Work of Maulana Muhammad Ali, it was 1931, probably August, when I and my wife left Lahore to go to the Fiji Islands. Before departure, I was an English teacher in the Muslim high school. The man responsible for my migration to Fiji to serve the education and religious needs of the Muslims of those islands was the late Babu Manzoor Ilahi, Joint Secretary of the Ahmadiyya Anjuman Isha'at Islam Lahore in those days, who used to be in correspondence with Islamic organizations all over the world, as well as with individual Muslims. He received a request through the Anjuman Himayati Islam for a teacher and missionary for Fiji. In other words, Muhammad Abdullah was in Fiji from 1931 to 1934, while W.D. Farad was establishing the Nation of Islam in Detroit. Prior to that, he had spent his entire life in British India, in a region that now forms part of Pakistan. As his son Zafar Abdullah wrote, Muhammad Abdullah was born, raised, educated, and married in the former British India, now Pakistan. When asked about his life, Muhammad Abdullah mentioned that when the Muslims in the Fiji Islands wanted a teacher to teach Arabic, assist in the propagation of Islam, and take care of the school, I offered my services and taught there for 28 years. All of my children were born there, and my eldest son was the first student from there to come to the United States for an education. It was only in 1955 that Muhammad Abdullah first came to the United States with his son, who was a student at the University of California at Berkeley, a fact confirmed by immigration records. As Muhammad Abdullah acknowledges, it was during this trip that he first met followers of Elijah Muhammad. In his words, I was in San Francisco and noticed some brothers operating a store, and I noticed the moon and star flag similar to the flag of some Islamic countries. So without asking them if they were Muslims, I greeted them. Assalamu alaikum. They told me they were starting an Islamic temple and invited me to speak on Islam. That was when I first learned of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Muhammad Abdullah also mentions that he later accepted a position at an Islamic center in Philadelphia. After he learned that a son of Elijah Muhammad was a minister at another center in the city, Muhammad Abdullah made repeated attempts to reach out to him. Eventually, he became the teacher of Warith Muhammad and tutored him in Urdu. As their friendship grew over time, W.D. Muhammad introduced his teacher to his father, Elijah Muhammad, during the annual Savior's Day convention of the Nation of Islam in Chicago, and the three dined together. Not only did Muhammad Abdullah correspond with Elijah Muhammad, but he eventually became one of his advisors and would frequently stay at his mansion in Chicago. Besides the chronological impossibility that W.D. Farad and Muhammad Abdullah were one and the same, there are also other important inconsistencies. To begin with, W.D. Farad was known for having a temper. Muhammad Abdullah, however, was known for accepting the harshest criticism with calm and humility. Further, while W.D. Farad's English was devoid of any noticeable accent in the early 1930s, its structure still suggested the presence of a foreign substratum. By 1931, however, Muhammad Abdullah had been trained as an English professor at an Islamic college. All of his writings, speeches, and books, including Religion and Society, demonstrate Muhammad Abdullah was perfectly proficient in the English language. The English of Muhammad Abdullah is that of a formally educated scholar. The same cannot be said of the founder of the Nation of Islam. W.D. Farad was a wanderer, whereas Muhammad Abdullah was the epitome of stability, spending 26 years in British India, 24 years in Fiji, and 37 years in the United States, most of them residing in California. The birth certificates of his children confirm that Muhammad Abdullah was in Fiji between 1931 and 1934. His wife, his children, and members of the Muslim community in Fiji could all confirm this as well. As we read in the article, Ahmadiyat in Fiji, Anjuman Hidayatul Islam in Lahore dispatched a schoolteacher, Mr. Muhammad Abdullah, with his newly married wife, Hamida, to Fiji. They arrived by steamer ship in 1931, as Fiji did not have international airlines operating then, and there was no international airport in Fiji until 1939. Mr. Muhammad Abdullah was more than a schoolteacher. He was also a wonderful peace-loving gentleman who was most keen to spread Islam and the teaching of the Urdu and Arabic languages. His wife was also the peace-loving type. Mr. and Mrs. Abdullah had also spent time in Levuka, since Mr. Abdullah was a teacher. Subsequently, Mr. and Mrs. Abdullah settled in the Nasauri area and acquired land to commence the school project. Both Mr. and Mrs. Abdullah set about on foot, walking over most of Nausori rural district, feeder roads, sugarcane farms, and farmlands, collecting donations to build a primary school and a wooden structure masjid at Vunimono. The Abdullah couple was very successful in their mission objectives and built the Vunimono Islamia School and its masjid from its original humble beginnings of a single building, which were both their home as well as the single classroom school. From those humble beginnings in the mid-1930s, the school grew into a much larger complex of several classrooms, additional buildings, and a modern concrete masjid. The Vunimono Islamia School gradually expanded and today has a multi-structure high school, complete with library, laboratories, and the latest in computer technology. Mr. Muhammad Abdullah worked very closely with the Ahmadiyya Anjuman Ishayati Islam Lahore as an esteemed and dependable ally. In the mid-1950s, Mr. Abdullah and his family migrated to the United States of America as a missionary and teacher. Although Akbar Abdullah is now deceased, I had the privilege of interviewing his brother Zafar Abdullah, the son of the legendary Muhammad Abdullah. I asked him how tall his father was, knowing full well that W.D. Farad reportedly measured 5 feet and 6 inches, and learned that he measured between 5 feet and 5 inches to 5 feet 7 inches. I inquired about his father's weight, being well aware that W.D. Farad weighed 130 pounds, and learned that Muhammad Abdullah weighed between 150 to 160 pounds and reached 175 pounds at his heaviest. If W.D. Farad's eyes were maroon, a reddish brown, the eyes of Muhammad Abdullah were simply brown. And like W.D. Farad, who had a mole on the left side of his face, above the lip and below the nose, Muhammad Abdullah had an unmarked face. W.D. Farad was reportedly diabetic. Muhammad Abdullah was not. Zafar Abdullah informed me that he had photos of his father when he was in his 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and confirmed that he did not resemble W.D. Farad. When asked where his father was between 1931 and 1934, he responded he was in Fiji. As well-informed scholars are well aware, W.D. Farad did not have tonsils. Muhammad Abdullah had intact tonsils. Did they just grow back? Like W.D. Farad, Muhammad Abdullah knew how to cook, but only a few dishes like pilau. His culinary abilities were limited. W.D. Farad, however, was a professional cook and a restaurateur. Zafar Abdullah does not have a copy of his father's birth or marriage certificate, a fact that is not unusual given the times and his country of origin. He does, however, have copies of his own birth certificate and those of his siblings, which firmly place their father in Fiji between 1931 and 1934. In addition, Muhammad Abdullah did not have a mole on the right side of his stomach, while W.D. Farad possessed such a mark. Nor did the Fiji immigrant have a small scar on the back of his left hand, as was reported of Farad. Importantly, Zafar revealed that his father did not speak in an Indo-Pakistani manner. His English was very good, Zafar stated. He explained that his father's accent was more British. W.D. Farad, however, spoke standard American English. Nobody who heard Master Farad in person ever noted an identifiable foreign accent. I am sure you have seen photos of W.D. Farad or Wally Dodd Ford, I continued. When I asked, "Is that your father in those photos?" the response was an unequivocal, "No, that is not my father." Since W.D. Farad was a habitual wanderer, I asked whether Muhammad Abdullah traveled much as a young man. I learned that he did not. He moved from the Indian subcontinent to Fiji and then from Fiji to the United States. End of story. Since W.D. Farad was considerably older than Muhammad Abdullah, I asked Zafar if he believed that his father's date of birth was accurate. He assured me that it was, and that there was no way that he was born several decades earlier. Probing further, I continued, "When Michael Muhammad Knight asked you whether your father was Farad, you said, 'I don't believe he was.' I explained to him that Knight and others viewed this as a belief as opposed to a fact. Zafar Abdullah responded unambiguously, 'My father was not Farad. When Farad was in Detroit, my father was in Fiji. A man could not be in two places at the same time. I told the very same thing to Louis Farrakhan when he came to visit me.'" Why, I asked, had his father become so closely associated with Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam? "My father had a lot of vision," Zafar explained. "Warith Din Muhammad was the product of my father. In other words, the goal of Muhammad Abdullah was to help bring the Nation of Islam into the world community of Islam. Considering all the evidence, it becomes evident to any rational person that W.D. Farad and Muhammad Abdullah could not have been the same person. As his death certificate indicates, he was born on June 15, 1905. His mother's name was Begum. His father's name was Ali. He died in Alameda, California on June 18, 1992 at the age of 87, and his social security number was 161365107. His gravestone reads, "Born June 15, 1905 in Ihsanpur, Pakistan, and died June 18, 1992 in Hayward, California." When he told Warith Din Muhammad that he was born in 1905, Muhammad Abdullah was speaking the truth, as the date is confirmed on his death certificate. When he told his driver and security guard that he was from Fiji, he was also being truthful. According to Honolulu, Hawaii, passenger and crew list 1900 to 1959, Muhammad Abdullah sailed from Suva, Fiji to Honolulu, Hawaii on July 21, 1955 on the Oransai. As a result of searching U.S. city directories from 1821 to 1989, I came across a Reverend Muhammad Abdullah, an assistant pastor who worked for the Muslim Society of America in San Francisco in 1957 and who resided at 870 Castro Street. Muhammad Abdullah only acquired a social security number in 1961-1962 in Pennsylvania. The claim that Muhammad Abdullah met Warith Din Muhammad in Philadelphia, PA, therefore seems to be substantiated. The Muhammad Abdullah theory has been debunked by Carl Evans in Chameleon. It was discredited in Finding W.D. Farad, unveiling the identity of the founder of the Nation of Islam. It was destroyed by Anton Beatty and Kevin Morris in W.D. Farad's First Footsteps in America. And it was incinerated by myself in W.D. Farad, the man, myth, and mystery behind the Nation of Islam. Using professional law enforcement quality facial recognition software, I compared four photographs of Muhammad Abdullah with the official photograph of W.D. Farad. The first one was not a facial match with 99.9% confidence. They were only 0.3% similar. The second one was not a facial match with 99.9% confidence. They were only 1.3% similar. The third was not a facial match with 99.9% confidence. They were only 1% similar. And the fourth was not a facial match with 99.9% confidence. They were only 0.36% similar. The claim that Muhammad Abdullah was W.D. Farad is therefore devoid of merit. May it rest in peace and not be revived. If you enjoy our content, please click like, subscribe, and share.